So, you want to become the best Magic player. What does that even mean, and how do you even approach something like that? Let's deep dive this in kind of a solo ThrabenU podcast style. Hello, folks. Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU, here for another Magic video, and today I'm gonna kind of do a deep dive on some theory. And I just kind of want to explain the impetus for this video. I've been doing a lot of coaching for people leading up to Eternal Weekend, kind of helping them with some self-improvement. I've been watching some discussions in the Magic community and in other gaming communities. It might be really obvious to you where some of this is coming from if you're a part of, say, the Slay the Spire community. Very much inspired by another video there. And just kind of some general reflections on life and magic, because it's cold outside and I can't go out and do very many fun things. So I've been sitting here with my own thoughts, and today I want to drop some of those on you and try to teach you a little bit about, well, what does it mean to be the best at magic? So, a lot of times when I sit down to talk with someone and kind of do a coaching session with them, one of the first things that I want to understand is like, what is your goal as a Magic player right now? What is it that you are trying to accomplish? And once I understand that, I can help push someone towards a healthy goal and help them take the steps to reach that goal. But kind of one of the things about goals is that they're hard to set, they're hard to stick by, and sometimes you might create a goal that is actually problematic in some ways. So, let's say that you have a goal. You want to become the very best. You want to become the best legacy player. How do you go about on that journey? How do you set and reach that goal? And I think the goal of trying to become the best legacy player is a stupid goal. And I don't mean that to discourage like improving on yourself and working on yourself and wanting to win, because I think those things are all awesome. What I mean by this statement is that I don't think this is a goal that you can sit there and go, okay, did I reach that goal? Did I accomplish the thing that I was trying to do? Because I think the way that you have worded the goal is innately bad. And a lot of times when I start kind of coaching someone, like they'll come to me with goals, and the goals are kind of just ever so slightly unhealthy because they don't understand something fundamentally about a goal like this one. If you'll allow me to do my grammar nerd thing for a moment and talk about language, words like best, strongest, bravest are what we call superlatives. The super root there meaning above, over. And superlatives, by their very nature, are sort of tricky because what does it mean to be the best? In what capacity have you surpassed everyone else? What set of criteria are you using to judge that someone is the best? And this is kind of why I have problems with goals that sound like this one. Like, I'm going to become the best legacy player. I'm going to become the best player in my area. How are you going to judge that? So I'm going to bring in some people to help me answer this question. All right. So we're gonna say that this stuffed animal is legacy player number 1. We're gonna call this player Agamemnon. Can you tell I'm a classicist? Now, our good friend Agamemnon here is a trophy leader on MTGO. Has so many trophies. You want trophies? I've got the most of them. And Agamemnon takes great pride in the number of trophies that they have. Whereas our second person, we'll call them Achilles, is instead going out and winning high-profile tournaments. You know, your Eternal Weekends and some things like that. And they're very fond of their skill of the format, and they're very proud of the work that they are putting in to achieve their results. So which one of these is the best player? The person who goes and consistently puts up the most results on an online platform? Is paper magic the real magic? Is taking down a 900, 1,000 person event more important than having more trophy wins on Magic Online? Rah, 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 rah. Our good friends Agamemnon and Achilles here fundamentally are probably going to disagree about what it means to be the best. And this is why I don't like definitions like this one. And it's not like those are the only two ways that you could compete on the axis of being the best. Is the person who goes and builds a breakout tier 1 deck from scratch the best legacy player because they saw things that no one else saw? Is the person who finds the tech that breaks the mirror of the best deck in the format the best player because they caught something that everyone else missed? If you win some elite invite-only event where only the highest caliber players are invited, your things like Magic Worlds, does that make you the best player? Even though those events have, 16 people? Is the person who has the highest amount of social media clout the best at the format because they do a lot of great things for the format in terms of publicizing it or making it accessible to people? Is the deck specialist who is a pillar of the community and supports that community and teaches everyone how to play that deck, are they the best? Is that grinder who can switch to every deck on a whim the best person in the format? You see the problem with a goal of being the best at something? It's just incredibly unclear. And can you actually be competing with other people for a title like the best if they don't even know they're competing? Let's go back to our good stuffed animal friends here. Agamemnon, our MTGO grinder with lots of trophies, is maybe not physically attending paper events. And therefore, the results of our little Sphinx here can't be compared to the results of our good friend Achilles, who is competing in these large paper events. You can't just take the data and statistics from one of these people and just map it onto the other one's experiences, because as we know, paper magic and Magic Online are totally different things. And if you want to toss Magic Arena onto here, that's a whole nother beast. Webcam Magic, that's a whole nother beast. And clarifying what I mean here, I'm not just talking about differing skill sets required, like Magic Online having a chess clock and Paper Magic not. The card pools are even different for the format. And for some of these decks, it's a really big deal breaker. Can you call someone who only plays on Magic Online the best painter player if they're missing out on all of the testing and all of the edges given to someone by playing something like Chaos Defiler? Magic is an innately competitive way. There are non-competitive ways to play Magic where you sit down and you have fun with a game of Commander or a game of Plane Chase, and that's awesome that Magic can be enjoyed in those ways, and I'm not crapping on those ways. But for many of you who are coming to my videos daily, like, you maybe play in your tournaments, even if it's only at the local level. You boot up Magic Online. You're competing against someone innately. This isn't a single-player game. But even though Magic is innately competitive, when you try to compare two players who aren't competing under the same set of rules, the same format, the same axes, even the same physical way of playing with the cards, be that digitally or with paper cards or with proxies in some cases at things like EDH events, it's really hard to compare these players and judge which one of them is better. A lot of times something like win percentage won't tell the whole story either. And let me give you an example of this. So for many years, somewhere on the order of 7 years, I lived in Roanoke, Virginia, where the brick and mortar Star City Games store is. And because I happened to live in Roanoke, Virginia, and yes, Star City being there did have a strong influence on me accepting a job there, let's be real. Because I lived in Roanoke, Virginia, I got opportunities afforded to me that the average Magic player would not have, just because of where I happen to live. I went and dug up some old results. So basically, every weekend, if I wanted to, I could probably play in 1 or 2 IQs, that is, invitational qualifiers, events that would feed into larger and more important events. And when you look at most of these finishes attached to my name, this is 10 minutes from my place of residence. Whereas a lot of other people at the time who were trying to grind IQs and such would be driving an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours every weekend to go and play in events. And someone who lived in Roanoke got to have their local level events just feed into large, more important events. So, did place skill have something to do with me getting all these finishes? Well, yeah, absolutely. But did I have it easier because of where I lived? You bet your ass. So, where you live impacts the number of events that you can feasibly go to. And I want to imagine that you are not an American player, because guess what? Not everybody who plays Magic is from America. Like, surprise Pikachu face, but it's true. And a lot of times for premier level events, if you live overseas, you maybe get one like WotC supported major event per year. And even if you are an incredibly skilled player, just in terms of your geographical location, you might not be able to show off that skill at the highest level unless you are doing something like competing online. And for that matter, a lot of the people who have tons and tons of tournament results are of a socioeconomic class where they can afford to travel to these tournaments. The people who are really, grinding tournament circuits oftentimes have disposable income that they can throw at, a couple $100 plane trip and a hotel room over the weekend, or are otherwise living the terrible grinder life of putting like 6 or 8 people in a hotel room. Lots of air mattresses are involved, and you do some very uncomfortable long 12-hour car rides to get to some places. And that's not even accounting for things like family. You've got a kid, you've got a significant other with some health issues, or maybe a parent that you have to take care of. How long can you really spend traveling for out of town tournaments? How long can you really spend just grinding leagues in front of the computer on Magic Online? And going back to kind of our initial question now, like, what does it mean to be the best? Well, it's hard to define what it means to be the best Magic player in the first place. And even if you get a bunch of people on board with the same definition and the same system, outside factors might kind of make that determination unfair in the first place. And let's get a little smart Thalia up there, all right? Let's drop some knowledge. So I recommend that if you are trying to set a goal, that you do so in a way that does not explicitly involve other humans innately. And I recommend setting goals that are fully within your own control. Just mentally speaking, if you set a goal and fail, you will probably be disappointed, sad, angry, upset in some capacity, right? Like, that's just a normal human reaction. So if you set goals that will fail for reasons that you can't control, you're setting yourself up to end up in a pretty bad mental spot. So you set your goal, I'm going to become the best Pioneer player. Well, how do you even prove that? Like, what metric are you going on? You see how you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure by making kind of a vague goal that's difficult to evaluate? And I think I'm going to use an example from my teaching job, actually, here, rather than the Magic life to illustrate this point. So the other day, one of my middle schoolers, who just is aware that I make content, I'm very open about that, asked me, "Hey, Mr. Gallagher, what's your sub goal for the year?" And I immediately, without thinking about it, fired off, "Sub goals are stupid." And the kid just looked at me like, "What? But you're a YouTuber. Like, you have to have a sub goal." Now, a much younger and less wise Mr. Gallagher absolutely had things like sub goals on Twitch, because I thought growth, that is, making the number go up, was the most important thing. And now while I still care about that a tiny bit, it's still something that I'm aware of. It's hard to not see numbers like this one. I don't care about that. And the reason I don't care is that I cannot control this number. I cannot make you click the like button. I can't make you click the subscribe button. I can't make you ring the bell and turn on all notifications. I can tell you to do that if I want to try to make this number go up, but ultimately, this is a number that is outside of my control. So instead, I'm just going to keep making the best content I can make, and if I keep getting better at what I'm doing, that number will go up naturally. But, if I had set, hey, I want to be at 25K by the end of the year, I would have been disappointed in my results. And instead, I look at the content I've made, I've looked at the things that I've contributed to the YouTube community and the Magic community, and I go, yeah, this was a good year for me. And I don't have to set a goal based on a number that I can't control. And I don't want to call out any specific people here because, that is not the intention of this post. This video is not about any one individual. That is why I am using, random classical names and stuffed animals to represent hypothetical people that don't really exist. But you have probably seen a lot of people on Twitter or social media or YouTube going can we get to 1,000 before Christmas? And then people are retweeting help this brother out. He's cool. And while I appreciate the support for friends and stuff, just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep being a good person. Those numbers will go up naturally. The numbers aren't the be all end all. So, kind of going back to the initial question, well, what if I want to become a better player? What if I want to work towards being the best Magic player? What sort of goals should I actually be setting? I think goals that show some degree of respect for and understanding of statistics and mental health are probably pretty important. And let's contrast two very, very similar goals here. The goal of person number one is I would like to top 8 this event. I have been practicing for months. I feel like I know my deck inside and out. I have a very good win percentage. My goal is to top 8 this event. Whereas player number 2 has the goal of I am going to top 8 an event in the next Y number of months. Now, these are innately similar goals, right? Both people want to top 8. But one person is saying, this particular tournament matters to me. I need to top 8 this. And the second person is saying, I would like to top 8 an event. And they don't necessarily care which one. Let's go into just a little bit of math. I'm going to try to keep this math light and talk about concepts because I'm a concepts guy, but we're going to talk about just a few numbers. I did a little Googling and I found MTG Cards Realms that has sort of a quick and dirty tournament results calculator. So let's say you said, I would like to top 8 Eternal Weekend. And the 2 Eternal Weekends that have already occurred as of the time of my recording, the Europe one and the Japan one, had 950 and 1,000 players for the Legacy events. And I want you to just kind of take a look here. Now, this is quick and dirty. This isn't accounting for draws. But just kind of thinking about how the bracket would play out with no draws. A record of 9-1 might not have been good enough to top 8 at an event of this magnitude. That is your 90% win rate might not have gotten you a top 8. Now, I want you to just think about how absolutely batshit insane it is to set a goal of I am going to top 8 this specific tournament if the hypothetical 90% win rate might not get you there in some cases. Now, will it necessarily actually be this strict? No, it'll be more complicated than this because people will draw double draws in are something that can absolutely happen in a lot of events, and the math will be much messier than what is here, but that should give you the general scale of how unlikely you are to top 8 one of these GP sized events. And if you are setting a goal of top aiding a very, very specific event, you are frequently going to not top eight to factors outside of your own control. Now, the things in your own control, they certainly matter. But in the case of a tournament being very tight and matching records not necessarily making the cut for top eight, your top eight status might be fully dependent on how many games of Magic your opponents in other rounds won. That is, did they drop the tournament? Did they play out? Did they just absolutely tank after they lost to you? And you don't really want to leave your mental health and the success of your goals in the hands of others. You want to grab your own destiny. You want to set goals that you can reasonably uphold. And so you should care about your results in tournaments. They do matter, but maybe don't just stake everything on your results. And part of the reason why you don't want to stake everything on your results is even the best players in the world don't really have all that high of a win percentage. So this is the MTG ELO project that kind of keeps track of competitive ratings of a bunch of the best players in the world. You can check out their site if you're interested in all the minutia. But what I want to do is just kind of highlight this column right here. That is the win percent column. The players with the best win rate in the world in these larger competitive events are boasting win rates essentially in the low 60s. And take a look at just kind of the utter magnitude of matches being played here, right? Like our good friend Reed Duke that everyone knows and loves has like 2,000 matches on record here. That's a lot of matches, right? And this is like clearly not counting all of the Magic that he has ever played or anything. And again, you can go into everything that is calculated and how it works if you're interested in checking out the website. So if the best players in the world are winning 60-65% of their matches across all the different formats over long stretches of time, and on a good day when you run hot, your 80-90% win rate maybe won't get you there in some absolutely gargantuan tournaments, that kind of puts it in perspective. It's not like the most healthy to get mad at yourself for failing to top eight a specific tournament. Now, if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to travel, if you're willing to attend a bunch of events, top eighting a tournament, that is probably a reasonable and healthy goal. But even more so than that, I recommend a different focus. So here's what I recommend from the perspective of a teacher. There's this organization called Actful. Long story short, they have to do with language learning. And one of the things that they advocate for is evaluating people and setting goals using can-do statements. That is, what should a language learner be able to set as a goal and, relatively speaking, be able to achieve? So a can-do statement might be something like, I can change this verb into a past tense. I can change this verb into the future tense. I can change all the endings of this noun. I can understand X, Y, and Z topics. And these can-do statements just allow you to check them off and see whether or not you have achieved your goal. And they're pretty clear, pretty useful. And if you contrast this to a goal, like I want to become the best at Magic, they check off that box. How do you know you did it? Well, there's a clear difference in these goals, right? So let's talk about some things that you can set for goals as yourself that are realistic goals that you could do to level up your own game. And I'm going to do these as will statements rather than can statements. I will learn to make a good sideboard guide. I will learn how and why to track data in matches. I will become an active part of X community to improve my understanding of Y topic. I will participate in playtesting rather than just playing games of Magic. I will test ideas that are alternative to my own beliefs. I will record videos of my matches and I will review them to critique my own gameplay and learn. I will get a coach to help me improve in my areas of weakness. Notice how these I can, I will statements are things that you can put a check mark next to. And you can say, I completed this thing. I figured out how to get to this goal and I have achieved it. All right, quick baby lesson on sideboard guides. There's a lot of ways to do them, but a lot of people I end up coaching for the first time just have never given it any thought or just have never seen a sideboard guide even, especially the people who are coming from Arena where you can just play best of one and never actually have learned how to use a sideboard, as crazy as that sounds to older Magic players. Anyway, this is an incredibly simplistic sideboard guide that I made for playing Red Prison at some point. Don't screenshot this and apply this tech today. This is maybe multiple years old at this point. But a simple level 1 sideboard guide is how do I plan on adjusting my numbers when I go to game 2 and game 3. And you don't have to do it for every deck in the format because Legacy is huge and massive, but get yourself a piece of paper, maybe both sides of the piece of paper, go through a bunch of the decks that you really expect to see, and this process will probably be helpful. And sometimes you might find oh, I don't actually need that sideboard card at all because I'm not boarding it in really anywhere in popular matchups. When I have a little bit more time, I find that writing some notes to myself can be really helpful as well. So this is one I made for Death and Taxes eons ago, 2020. And I made some adjustments for the play and on the draw, and for every matchups, I wrote myself some notes for the most important things that I wanted to be thinking about in that matchup, things that I might adjust if I saw certain things, and things of that nature. So in both of these sideboard guides, this is 2 pieces of paper, front and back, 1 page of paper, front and back, if even. The sideboard guide doesn't have to be massive, but the process of sitting down and actually committing to ink a lot of your thoughts will help you see where your gaps are. And while I'm giving away coaching advice for free in the middle of this video, let's talk about this particular word right here, playtesting. I think when a lot of people say that they are testing for an event, what they mean is that they are going to their local Legacy event and playing their 4 rounds, or they're playing leagues on Magic Online, and that is a great way to do your initial testing for an event. But when I'm talking about serious playtesting in preparation for an event, what I mean is, hey, I'm not sure how this specific card works in this matchup. I am going to draw this card on turn 3 every game that we play. I'm going to artificially change my draws so that I draw this card every time on turn 3. I'm going to see how this impacts the matchup. Or I'm having trouble against this new card that just came out. I want you to have that card in your hand every opening game. I want to learn how I need to play around that. You can set up scenarios that you want to learn about and specifically test those things. So the thing about a game of Magic is that you're playing a 60 card deck. You add a single copy of a card into your deck. Even if you're playing a cantrip deck, you're not guaranteed to see that card in any particular game or even any particular match. when you are seriously doing some playtesting and you're trying to figure out, like, what am I doing with my flex slots? How do I approach these matchups? Like, set yourself up scenarios and get in the reps with that specific scenario to learn what you need to learn to move on. If your playtesting looks the same as when you are just playing, you're probably not doing a very good job of playtesting. Like, maybe during your playtesting, you just like flip your entire hand on the table, say like, I've got this, this, and this. What are you thinking about right now in this situation? What am I thinking about in this situation? How are these two things different? What are you trying to play around here? What should I be trying to play around? Like, have observers, watch you, cut into your matches, ask you why you're doing things. Take your takesy backsy lines to figure out, like, okay, how am I optimally supposed to pilot this based on the information that I do have? And, get in there and try to learn something, because the learning that you do may actually be more valuable than the data that you acquire through playing matches. So, let's try to talk about some data. So I'm going to do my best to teach you some things about data without making this overwhelming. So let's talk about data without actually putting too many numbers and squiggles and letters on the screen. And kind of first thing that you need to understand about magic data is that with the sample size that you yourself gather as an individual, you will probably never create something that has real statistical significance. And by that, I mean your data set is not large enough to like scientifically and empirically draw conclusions from whatever data you can probably make as a Magic player. And what that means is you're trying to make conclusions. You're trying to sit there, you're trying to be the scientist, but you're looking at just the tiniest possible sample size and going, am I sure of this? And the answer with magic data is almost always going to be, no, I'm not sure of this. And occasionally we can get large data sets for Magic from events like Eternal Weekend that have just tons and tons and tons of matches. But, the 100 matches worth of data that you collect when you are going and recording, say, your results in Magic Online leagues maybe aren't going to generate any meaningful data. So what we're trying to do as Magic players is do our best to make conclusions based on data that isn't actually large enough to make the conclusions on. You kind of see the innate problem here, right? The data is useful, but since your data set is almost always going to be too small to have a p-value, that is kind of the thing associated with statistical significance, to have a p-value that is meaningful, your data says exactly what it says, and it's very hard to draw a hard, concrete, factual conclusion from that data. And I'm going to make up kind of a ridiculous scenario to prove my point. So let's say that you have specifically played 100 games of Magic versus a Blood Moon Stompy deck list, okay? So you won 90 games, you lost 10 games. Can you say that you have a 90% win rate versus Moon Stompy? Well, the data says you won 90 of your last 100 games. That's what your data says. Can you say my deck has a 90% win rate versus Moon Stompy? That is a surprisingly difficult claim to make based on data that like appears as black and white as this. So like mentally you want to go 90-10, 90% win rate. I'm incredibly likely to win that match. And that last part, I'm incredibly likely to win that match, may or may not actually be true. So for example, let's say that you are the best, loaded word, the best player in the world, and your matches are against a bunch of local level players. You have handed a bunch of people who know how to play Magic the deck, and you say, all right, you're going to play this against me, and you just absolutely cream them. Do you get to say the matchup is 90% when there is a massive skill discrepancy between you and the people you're playing against? Maybe not. Also, what if the distribution of those wins is not actually uniform? Let's say that you won 90 matches in a row, and then you lost the last 10 in a row. You lost all of them after Broadside Bombardiers was printed and completely changed the matchup, and now it just feels absolutely unwinnable. Do you still want to say that you have a 90% win rate when you're just bombing all of the most recent matches? And another thing that I see a lot online is that when you have two specialists of different decks, they will have very different feels for what a matchup is going to look like. So I remember one specific matchup in particular. Way back when EW Landon was just going on an absolute tear with Reanimator and was just at the top of his game. I was having a conversation with him about the Reanimator versus D&T matchup. And the data that he collected said that he was winning 80% of his matches versus Death and Taxes or something like that. And the data that I had as the Death and Taxes player was that I was winning like 65 or more. I don't remember what the exact number was, percent of my matches. But the data that we both had suggested that for us as individuals, we were winning that matchup more than we were losing. But our data sets contradicted each other. And because these data sets are so small and influenced highly by both of us being skilled individuals, kind of masters of our craft who are going to just win those matchups more so than the average person, it was very difficult to put a realistic number. What is this matchup supposed to look like? What is the win percentage in a vacuum? Because the Magic games aren't played in a vacuum. There's going to be skill discrepancies and such between players. And so my win percentage in a matchup is not necessarily equal to this is the win percentage that X deck has against Y deck with players of equivalent skill. And let's assume that you are doing some tracking of data over a prolonged period of time. Well, how often are you supposed to reset that data? Are you going to reset that data once a year? Are you going to reset that data every banning cycle? Are you going to reset that data every time a single set releases? There's a lot of product being pushed out in Magic these days. And if you are resetting your data every time a new set releases, how are you going to gather a big data set? But similarly, if new information, if new cards are changing matchup profiles, all the time, what do you want grouped together into your data set? Data is cool. There are a lot of people who do great things in the Magic community with data. Bryant Cook in the Legacy community is an excellent example of that, who has done really good stuff with spreadsheets for the Epic Storm and other similar archetypes for years. But it's complicated. Like, I want you to imagine if you kept your matches for an entire year. I want you to just think about the difference in Legacy, like right now, November for me, December for you, 2023. Like, think about Legacy now versus Legacy, say, pre-Lord of the Rings, which was just a massive shakeup with Orcish Bowmasters, the One Ring, the cycling cards. Format's totally different. Do you want to lump together your win rates versus artifact combo decks before and after the One Ring was printed? Probably not, right? So, learning how to track your data in the first part, learning how to make a spreadsheet of wins and losses, take some notes, do some meaningful stuff like that's really cool. And even if you're not the statistics nerd who really understands everything associated with it, you can use some, smart spreadsheet. There's a lot of examples out there. I think this one is just called Smart Magic. Uh, it is eons old. I don't know if it still exists or is being updated. But for a long time, I tracked my data with decks that I cared about, and beyond just the numbers, I also wrote myself just kind of some notes about the matches because it's really cool to be able to look at the numbers and the decks, the graphs, and all of that, and get a feel for what some of the data says. And when you start tracking things over a long period of time, you can go and see like, okay, which one of these builds were and weren't working. And you can make yourself some really cool things that may or may not give you anything with real statistical significance, but you can probably get some trends, you can get some patterns, and then try to responsibly, emphasis on responsibly, use your data to try to draw some conclusions and make some meaningful changes to your play or data or play testing based on what you see. I'm not going to lie to you, this has been a little bit of a blur of recording, so I don't remember whether or not I said this. I'm going to say it again, or I'm going to say it for the first time, whichever is appropriate. Learning how to record data, track data, is an awesome first step towards growth because a lot of people will overestimate their own win percentage and you will just kind of remember your wins more than your losses. It's pretty easy to dismiss your own losses. But a lot of times you can sit there, you can point at the numbers and go, oh, I am losing this matchup 80% of the time. Like, do I need to fix this matchup? Am I playing this wrong? And like, you can use that as a jumping point to learn something. But once you start tracking your data, you also need to learn that like the data does have its limitations, and the data says exactly what the data says. And since your sample sizes are probably going to be so small, you maybe can't draw conclusions with statistical significance from it. This is sort of like the first step is to learn a heuristic, to learn a rule of thumb. And the second step is like, okay, now when do we break that? When do we not do that? When do we ignore that? The data kind of works the same way. Let's put a little ribbon on this one, shall we? Let's wrap it up. So I hope that I have shown you today that sometimes things that initially sound simple aren't actually so simple, right? Like striving to be the best at something is innately a loaded term. And so when you can, I don't know, say, you're looking forward to January or looking at New Year's resolutions. Say that you are going to set a goal. Set something that is in your control. Set something that you can do. Set something that's fully in your control so you're not going to be disappointed when it fails for reasons outside of your own control. And more so than anything else, I recommend goals that emphasize your growth rather than goals that emphasize your numbers in some capacity, especially if some of those numbers are outside of your control. When you focus on your growth, when you focus on your self-improvement, the results are going to follow. But if you set goals that are like, I'm going to top 8 this specific tournament, and you fall short of that because you got a pair down, or you miss on breakers or whatever, you're going to kind of feel bad that you have disappointing yourself. But also, like, don't take away from this video that caring about your results is bad, because it's not. But care about your results in a healthy way. Like, I could have done better at this event, and I didn't, it's okay to be mad at yourself in those situations, right? Like if you didn't test enough, if you didn't drink enough water and you got dehydrated and you couldn't think in those last couple of rounds, if you didn't take care of yourself, if you didn't do enough prep, like you can be mad at yourself. You can be disappointed in yourself, for a personal failure that is your own fault. But it's not super healthy to say, oh man, if my top card would have been X card, I would have top aided this event. Magic innately has variance in it. That's part of what makes it unique and interesting and fun. But you don't want to link your mental health to your results and then, absolutely just lose your fucking shit when one card draw difference is you top aiding versus not top aiding, right? Care about the things that are within your control and accept the things that aren't in your control. You end up like completely tying your self-worth to your magic results, to your win rate, to the number of trophies that you have. Like, you're probably going to end up in a dark and unhappy place. And I say that as someone who has absolutely been there before. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say. I hope this came across as something that was useful and coherent. I wrote myself some notes before I got going. This was kind of something that I was thinking about, and it seemed like it would be worth putting up on the YouTube. This isn't my normal thing. Usually I'm more of a gameplay guy, but if you like what you heard today, there's probably going to be more of that in the other videos. And I would like to thank my sponsors, moxfield.com, which is an awesome place to keep deck lists, as well as Cool Stuff Inc., and that's a great place to buy some cards. If you're interested in Magic cards, check them out and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% on your next order. I would love to hear what you have to say about today's video down in the comments below. Feedback is very much appreciated. Sometimes I record these sorts of videos and people love them. Other times they're like, hey, idiot, stick to the meme gameplay. So, All right. Have a great rest of the day regardless. See ya.